the dream that is a dream has disguise, it has confusion, it doesn't make sense. But a message to me from the divine is very specific. And then if I don't tell them the message, I feel sick.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. TAS, and welcome to this edition of Talk with TAS. Today, I'm excited to welcome to my show Dr. Lauren Martin. Hi, Miss Laura. How you doing?
I'm technically challenged, but I'm here. Thank you.
You, you are doing great.
Thank
I,
you.
I can see all that beauty. I can
Thank
see
you.
it. I see
Thank
your
you.
background picture that kind of eases some of our worries away. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being on my show, Dr. Lauren Martin. Let me go through so everybody understands. She is a psychotherapist. She's a poet, and she is a devoted Ìyânífá. I'm perhaps
You
mispronouncing
did
it.
good. It's Ìyânífá, but it's very hard, that word.
Thank you, Ìyânífá. She is based in Oakland, California. She has been on a spiritual walk that has helped her to transform, and it has informed her poetry that is portrayed in The Night of the Hawk. Um, Lauren, her themes that sort of drive her work and her written work is healing, loss, love, and empowerment, and how that impacts the human experience. So, Dr. Lauren, welcome to my show. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Teresa. I'm so honored to be here. Really, truly, thank you.
But thank I want to jump right in. Can you share, because you're a psychotherapist, but
Mhm.
now you've written this work that's receiving a lot of acclaim, and it's poetry. And I talked about the fact that your focus is loss, love, and healing. And now you've written a book as a psychotherapist. Can you share the moment or perhaps the experience that first drew you to writing?
I was really young and first of all, I was born seeing the dead, so that was always something that I had to negotiate in a Western world where seers are not really understood.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was a very solitary experience, which I certainly write about in my work, sort of the isolation of feeling different. And I think that's a universal theme. We all feel that. But when I was in sixth grade, I had written something, I have no recollection of what, but I got pulled out of class and I thought I was in trouble, but it turned out they were suggesting that I was a poet and I didn't even know what poetry was. And from that
Mhm.
point on, I started writing and I studied it um, through high school and college. And I kind of assumed that I would compile a book after college and start submitting, but then I just became really enveloped with my own psychoanalytic training and this very arduous shamanic course that took a long time to sort out.
Well, now I want to welcome Melanie Hall Hope, who's joined us also. Now, shamanic, you have the audience to understand what that is and how it impacted everything that you do now.
So I think there are lots of different forms of shamanism. Most religions have a root to them that is more esoteric. But historically, when we all kind of began, there were these religions or tribal-based traditions that were um, monotheistic, believed in one God, but worshipped representations of God and nature. And I personally haven't my own particular experience with being a seer. Not every shaman does, but not having a structure for managing that, the dead or the ghosts of my life really, or of the world, really made my life disrupted. And so I began to seek in all of the traditions a way to calm the mischievous nature of the dead that are still here and unhappy and try to sort that out. And I ended up in West Africa in the tradition Ifa. So
Well, now, I was trying to think of the television program where the young lady saw the dead. And I can't think of her name, but she had a
I
series.
she had a
And
series.
she had a
There are a
series.
few
That,
big mediums that
yeah,
there's,
the
you know,
medium, but I
yeah,
wasn't thinking about her because I do
okay,
like her. I was
yeah,
thinking about the other young lady, but not that one. But the medium, because I like both of the shows, and I really like the medium. And the way the person who saw the dead in the medium, the way it was being portrayed was there was still something that had to be resolved. And
I think
as a
so.
result, guys, she was able to then help the police to resolve those cases. They weren't cold cases, they were current
Yeah,
cases. And so she was able to use her interaction with those who had passed in order to help solve their deaths.
right.
And so when you talk about your shamanistic journey, and being able to calm some of that, how did that then influence your creative process? Because you've got internal things that are happening with
Yeah,
you personally, but then
yeah.
you've got those external things that are happening. How did all of that come to bear with your writing?
It's a great question. Well, actually, I think they're all similar, being a therapist and being a poet and being a shaman, because they all deal with death in some way, shape, or form. They deal with darkness. And to be a good therapist, you have to feel comfortable in the dark, which so many therapists get people there and then they medicate them or over medicate them. So I think it's all sort of this journey to and through the dark night of the soul, which you do as a therapist and comes through my poetry and certainly with my shamanism and kind of having these, whether it's individual people or crimes that are unresolved, I can then use spiritual work to try to resolve those issues. So it's busy, but my poems actually come as dreams. So I think they are often gifts from various ancestors or dead that want me to communicate something for them. So I don't really feel, I feel in some ways like my being a channel generally is coming through in poetry, and I wake up and it's there, the poem is there. Although sometimes it's a little different. The other night I was half asleep and my goddaughter had fled the fires and she crawled into bed with me, and I was sort of in that in between stage, and a poem came right from that moment. But at the in the middle of wakingness, and yeah.
Yeah, I want to stay there for a moment. Now, you talked about your poems come as a dream. Help the audience to understand that because as writers, we write, things come to, well, let me say that differently. I believe that inspiration comes in many different forms. I believe also that sometimes we are given exactly what we are to write, whether we're in our dream state or we sit down and the our connection with that higher power just downloads it and
Yeah.
you just write that.
Yes.
So when you talk about you get your poems manifest for you in your dreams, what is that like? Describe that.
I mean, I certainly have the other thing because I have some other writing that's more psychoanalytic, that you're describing, which is so interesting as a writer, that feeling of something that's just appeared there that you have to get out, and you're not satisfied until it's out there. And you're trying to write as fast as your thoughts are moving,
Yeah.
but the poems are different in that I really do wake up and have a poem there, or if I fall asleep at acupuncture is a huge place for me. The whole thing will be there, and it requires typically very few edits. I wrote a poem for the Chibok girls that I woke up with. It's a long poem and it's sort of elegiac. And so I imagine it's somebody's ancestor, one of those girls telling me to communicate on their behalf. So things like that. It's very different than the other writing, but
Well,
it's
do
all
you
spiritual, I think.
Well, I think so also because I'm a spiritual person, not a religious person. So, do you keep a recorder, or do you record on your phone, or do you have a pad by your bed that you did once you wake up that you try to get the
Notes.
information down on?
I do notes in my phone. So as soon as I am like half awake, I do a voice memo of the poem in notes. I have a million of them. And then
Mhm.
later I like look at them and sometimes I'm like, what was that word
Yes,
that didn't come out through the
yes,
translation? Is
exactly,
that what you
exactly.
do? Do you have a pad or do you?
Well, I do all. I do everything. Everything from the perspective of some mornings I wake up and I start recording stuff. Some
Right,
mornings I wake up and I want to write something.
right.
Uh, I'm writing all the time,
Yeah,
and I try to take a pad with me because I'm always writing something.
yeah.
That's interesting. This morning when I woke up, I had some people on my brain, and it was like I really dreamed about them.
Mm,
But I spoke to the person actually before we came
huh,
live because they were really heavy on me, and
mm,
everything is good. But I've learned when I haven't acted, I'll still have the people on my mind, but life gets ahead of me, and I just never reach out. It doesn't always work well.
yeah.
It doesn't always
No,
turn
I
out
think
well. To
that
say
that
it
I
that way.
think even sometimes, I think people we care about come to us in that way when we're open or strongly tied
Yes,
to them. And sometimes if we reach out to them, we cue them to pay more attention.
yes, yes. And like I said, everything is fine with them, but it really was disturbing me what I saw in my dream.
Of course.
Um, and I'm a dreamer, so it
Yeah.
disturbed me.
Yeah.
And I will tell my mother the two words that was in my mind as it relates to that, because I always use her as my friend. I tell her to write it down, and I
Right.
guess I could write it down, but I
Right.
tell her to write it down so that if I have to visit it later, I
Yeah.
will know when I said it. And I guess I should
Yes.
start putting it on my own calendar. And I'm gonna do that once we're done with this live. I guess I need to do that.
Yeah.
See how my God was orchestrating this today, because I
I
never
think
put it on my calendar, and I could
right.
put it on the
Right.
calendar, but I never do. But like I said, I've learned to reach out to the individual when they're on my mind. And everything was great. And we had a great conversation. It was so good to catch up with them. But even though things were great, I still know they were in my heart
Art.
for a
Right.
reason. And
Yes.
I can never forget that.
Right.
It may mean that I need to reach out to them more this year
Right.
because they
Right.
were in my heart for a reason.
Reason.
And when I think about someone, or I won't thinking about them. Let me
Right.
be clear. I dreamed about them. When I
Which is
dream about
different.
somebody,
Yeah.
it's very different.
And it's
Um,
different from a regular dream. People always ask me that, how do you know it's not just your own personal dream? But, to me, I mean, I grew up seeing and hearing the dead and actually hearing the Yoruba chanting, which I didn't know was Yoruba, and a certain kind of drug, the Ogoni drum. But I'm trained in dream interpretation, and you can tell they're just, is you have the disguise. The dream that is a dream has disguise. It has confusion. It doesn't make sense. It's not linear. That's a dream. That's your unconscious trying to express something. But a message to me from the divine is very specific. And usually I sometimes have people come into the dream and say, my name is X. This is a picture of my grandson. This is who you're going to see tomorrow. These are the things you need to tell him. And then I'll meet that person the next day in a restaurant or something like that. And then if I don't tell them the message, I feel sick, you know.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So
And we'll have to come back on another time to talk about dreams. So I'm really meaning that, Lauren, because
good.
I'm always trying to interpret my dreams, and I will tell you, my sister and I spoke earlier also, and she told me her dream, and I told her I couldn't. My mother always, this is probably just a Southern thing with my mama, but she always said you don't tell your dreams before daytime, and it was daytime,
Hmm.
but it was still dark here because it's overcast, and so I
Right.
didn't tell my sister exactly what I said. I think I may have told the person. but it made me feel bad what I saw. And then she
Right.
told me bits and pieces of what she dreamed. And if I'm not mistaken, it was about two people too in fire. And
Mm,
I
mm,
said to her, I said, this is interesting. We both have had dreams, and then we're two people.
right.
So that says to me, there's something happening that needs to get our attention. Either it's going to impact us, and it's like a warning, or it's about someone, either the people that we dreamed about or whatever. But that's a message
Right.
because I believe in the messages. So I'd love to get you back on, which I'm
Uh,
going to do that. I'm serious about
Okay.
that. We're going to talk about
Okay.
dream
Happy to
interpretation
be
this year
there.
because I think that is so important. And the fact that you get your dreams, your poems, these poems through your dreams.
Yeah.
That is very,
Yeah.
very interesting. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Night of the Hawk.
Okay.
The Night of the Hawk is a collection of your poems. Thank you, Meta Benjamin Hoskins, for joining us. And I don't know if I said thank you for joining us to Subham 1895, but thank you for joining us also. So, the Night of the Hawk is a collection of your poetry. You have lots of poetry.
Yes.
How did you select the poems that you were going to use in this acclaimed work? How did you select those poems?
I'm always trying to weave the kind of themes of what's happening in my world in an arc, like over a period of time developmentally, with what's happening spiritually. Um, and so to me, the As the Bow Breaks series, which is spelled BOW for it, because it's about you know, it's about abuse and dynamics with men, particularly, a lot with my dad. And bow as in, reverence. I am trying to discuss the changes that happen over the course of a lifetime, where you begin as a child in your perspective, and then as you age and your parents age, where you kind of reconcile the dynamic. And similarly, I feel like that, is true in my spiritual life. There are poems that really describe my own frustration with my destiny and, sort of the isolation of it, and my joy in the beauty of it, and my reverence for what we call the Orisha, which are representations of God and nature. Um, and then within that, there's, tons of poems about misogyny and what it's like to age as a woman in our culture. But yeah, and some heartbreak, some good heartbreak. I'm always writing my heartbreak.
Oh, yes, we experienced them.
Yeah.
Well, now you said something that I thought was very interesting, and particularly as we've just entered the new year, the isolation of your journey.
Hmm.
And you talked about the joy and the beauty, but the isolation of your journey. You've you've been seeing dead people or spirits since you were younger.
Yeah.
You've been writing, but in the sixth grade they realized, oh my gosh, this young lady can really write. And so then we fast forward, and now you have you've used your shamanic journey, shamanistic. I'm saying it that way, journey to help kind of bring everything together. You got your poetry book, but then you said the isolation of your journey.
Yeah. Well, ironically, so I had in 2015, as I started to calm the interference that I had, which really manifested in me being slightly nomadic for a long time and journeying and trying to figure this out. And as I sort of started to calm that down, I had a back procedure and I got a very complicated spinal injury. And I ended up in bed from 2015 and still on and off now. And so as I was lying there and, real agony, I mean, I kind of felt like I had bed spins, which was horrible because I'm sober a long time and I didn't want
Mhm.
to didn't
Yes,
want to feel that ever again.
yes.
Um, and I started writing and I started to think about, okay, what is it that, God wants me to do that I've never been organized enough to do. And I just
Mm.
started writing a series of different books. And this is the one that got picked up. It was really my sister too that was, she said, these poems are great and you've always written and you should just put them together. So
Oh,
that
don't we just love those
that was the
sisters?
motivation. It was just sort of, God, what is it that you're wanting me to do that I haven't done while I'm lying here?
Now, I think that isolation can be a physical isolation, and then it can be emotional. It can be so many things. But to hear you talk about, because you were in essence almost both of them, because physically you
Yeah.
weren't able to be around a lot of people because of your mobility
Yeah.
concerns at that time, and then the emotional component of it. And then I guess I would say the intellectual component too,
Right.
because you're not being able to have that discourse back and forth with folks.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted to bring that out, Lauren, because at this time of year, individuals start, I don't do resolutions, but people start resolutions.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think it's that isolation that prevents them from moving forward
Right.
with what they've said that they want to do.
Right.
So hearing you talk about how you were able to sort of center yourself as you were going through that to get the download that you
Hmm.
needed in order to then take what was there that you maybe hadn't really thought about doing it in this manner, but then to make it a reality. And I sometimes think that might be beneficial as we're trying to I want to say anytime we're trying to start something new, because lots
Right.
of times we just jump right in. For those
Right.
that's going to want to jump right in, folks,
Right.
some people don't jump in; they just talk about it. But we jump
Right.
right in, but we don't have our download yet, and
Yeah.
so we spend a lot of time being
Spinning.
busy, thinking,
Yeah.
spinning,
Yeah.
but we're not productive. And so
Right.
I thought that was very important, and so I wanted you to bring that out
I think
for our audience.
doing things and writing things and reading things really requires being able to sit with your internal experience, even if that's hard and you're despondent, which I certainly was. I got a spinal fluid injury and a spinal fluid leak, and it's a life-altering injury. So I'll have to manage it for the rest of my life. And I think, when you're in that place of having to produce something, you have to be able to reconcile the truth of what's going on with you. And so obviously I'm a big supporter of therapy.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us, if we can kind of get out of that place of reactivity and be in our inner world, then we can produce. I also am a big believer in baby steps, and that the best thing that we can do for people in the world is to, impart our vulnerability. That it's actually in our despair, in our pain, in our grief, that
Mhm.
we give other people permission to have theirs and feel less alone.
Mhm. And in my platform, I try to be as transparent as possible. And my thing going into 2025 is to be even more transparent because there are days that I'm not 100%.
Right.
No matter how much I talk to myself, that positive self-talk, I just
Yeah.
am not.
Yeah.
And I think that the general public needs to understand that that's life.
That's
So if
life.
you're not 100% that day, that's okay
Right.
because no one is. But I think sometimes societal standards of what we see make us believe if we're not 100%, then there's something wrong with us. But to me, you're just a human being
Right.
living this experience
Right.
that's called life, and you're trying to navigate the best way you can at that particular moment in time.
That's right.
And,
Right.
of course, as a therapist, you know the importance of that, but that's a hard concept
Yeah.
to sit with and to
Truly.
know that it's sort of your superpower if you can ever sit with it and
If you can do it.
understand it, if you
That's
can
right.
do it, if you
Right.
can do it. But you've done it.
Yeah.
You have done
Thank you.
it. And you've done it and you come out on the other side. Now, you talked about the poem, The Bow, and its
Mm.
significance. And that resonated with me because you talked about, how you marry, so to speak, the poems and the spirituality, and
Right.
how they sort of overlap, are part of that arc.
Right.
Um, do you think, though, that the meaning of poetry changes over time, both for you as the writer and then for your readers? Let me welcome
Yeah.
uh, Leslie A. Hill 7 joined us also. See
Thank you.
here. hmm
I
Oh,
think that, yeah.
let me, I don't know if, I'm sorry. I just want to mention the folks that have joined us. I'm not sure if I said that Avis Haydenberg had joined us also, but they joined us also. I'm sorry, Dr. Lauren.
Okay. Perfect. Um, I think, what's cool about poetry is that it leaves a lot of room for people to make it their own. Um, that there's a lot of interpretation because it's like memoir. It is personal to me, but it also has space for people to think and emphasize different points. Sometimes I don't love it. I had this, one review was so funny because I have this poem I love that you know is talks about a moment when my ex-boyfriend I found out my ex-boyfriend was cheating on me, and um he was so desperate to justify what he had done. He was like, "Well, you always need to be right." So of course I referenced that in the poem, and then somebody interpreted that as me being, kind of narcissistic, and so I, I either didn't communicate it well, or that's what they needed to see. And I think
You can
people
see.
are so individualized, and the work, once it's gone from your hands, has a whole other life.
And that's so funny, Dr. Lauren, because, you know, you correct me. Sometimes narcissistic people, thank you, Santiago, Cynthia, for joining us. Sometimes narcissistic people deflect. Um, you know what I'm saying? They deflect, and then so that's my thing with what that person said. It could have been deflected on their
Oh, they
part.
project
Oh,
all over the
absolutely.
place. I mean, ugh, I just wrote a whole book about narcissism, which I haven't been able to get picked up because, people, publishers have said it's too academic. I don't think it is because my clients understand it. I've given it to them. But it really talks about that piece of, kind of truly understanding that diagnosis that's being thrown around like crazy, and
Mhm.
how much of the time the people that are throwing it around are actually narcissistic and projecting onto other people. Yep, you're
Absolutely.
very right. Yep,
And because when you said that the poem, you make the statement about your ex-boyfriend, your ex said that you just have to be right.
right.
Why do I have to be right?
Right.
Now that we are trying to address what you've done, you're saying
Exactly.
it's my fault.
Yeah.
No, no, no. It's not
Yeah.
that I gotta be right. Let's just deal with the
With
behavior.
facts, like basic facts. I know people have a really hard time holding reality, and I think particularly if they've done something bad,
Mhm,
in order to get to a place where you can do something that's harmful to another person, you have to be steeped in self-justification. So when you get confronted, of course you're going to blame the other person. And that's just it's a sad, nature of how human beings are managing their pain.
mhm.
Therapy, therapy, therapy. It's so helpful.
Absolutely. And Gina Sunderland joined us, and then Razzle Dazzle Mummy said perhaps the people reading it aren't academic enough around a scientific concept, referencing the book that deals with narcissism. And that
That's
could very
interesting.
well be.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
You know,
that's a good point.
uh, but it's an interesting thing, though. Um, Now, because you did mention early on that you do have your academic writing, but
Hmm.
we're talking about your poetry. So one of my question is, looking back over your writing career, what has been some of the most significant milestones or turning points for you? And that could be either your poetry or in your in the academic arena.
I
What's been
think the most, I mean, it's so, for me, the most important things are my interactions with other people. Publishing this book has allowed me to meet so many people like you that are so thoughtful. It's so cool. I mean, particularly so I left New York and I came to California and I got injured here. So I didn't even have my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then the book has connected me with all these incredible fellow authors. And it's really lovely to just get an experience of connecting to other people, because for me, I feel like that's where God lives. I mean, obviously in nature and the Orisha and all these things, but in that exchange that's so pure, when people can get away from their own projections and actually connect and hear each other, I really think that is the experience of God for me. It's so meaningful. So I've really enjoyed this whole, promotion that Night of the Hawk demanded, because I've gotten to meet such amazing people like yourself.
Well, thank you. I got another question for you. Why did you why did you title the book "The Night of the Hawk"?
It's such a good question. So this is a little bit of a complicated answer, but in Ifa, there's a divination system, and there are 256 possible combinations within that system. Each number set refers to what's called an Odu. And each Odu has 1,864 verses that are taught orally from elder to junior priest or priestess. So when you get initiated, you pull and cast your own Odu. But Yoruba believe that you come to the world with an Odu, whether you initiate or not. And that Odu speaks of your destiny. So in Ifa, I've always had hawks around me, and in my Odu, one leg actually is hawk, and it talks about issues with the mothers of the night, who are represented in large birds. So it's night of the hawk, referencing Ìyâní, which are also witches, and
Mm-hmm.
just this, I've lived a very different destiny, and my sister initiated also to support me, because we're so close. And she actually got the exact Odoo flipped on its head. And her Odoo speaks exactly of her life and who she is, and is far less complicated than mine. So I love that piece of Ifa, the kind of very elaborate details about your destiny and how it makes sense, that I was this kid that had things in the night going bump, and my sister didn't. She was my support and my allegiance, but she didn't have those same issues. So that's how we got Night of the Hawk.
Well, if you were talking about the poetry and seeing dead people, um, and because I'd asked a question about your how the shamanic, no, I'm not, you said
Shamanic. Shamanic.
shamanic, thank you,
Yeah.
journey, how it influenced your creative progress. And when you talked about um, the seeing dead people and then the poetry and the dark night of the soul,
Yes.
is what you said, the dark night of the
Yes.
soul, then it clicked for me.
Right.
And so basically you confirmed what I was thinking, that the title really reflects your journey. It
Yes.
reflects who you
Yeah.
are.
Yes.
But then it made me think about us general people too, readers. We all, I shouldn't say we all, the majority of us, never be say everyone, but if you're in tune, you too have that night of the hawk.
Yes.
Meaning, I don't mean it from a perspective of seeing dead people, but in the night.
Hardship.
Yes,
There's
yes,
hardship.
yes.
That- Have you
And
read the M. Scott Peck book, The Road Less Traveled? And the first line is "Life is suffering." I mean, we're human beings in a world with each other and other elements, and life is unpredictable and difficult. And how we reconcile that pain and the unfortunate circumstances of our life is, up to us. It's a personal choice, but it does require that we, work through and sit with darkness. Yeah.
And, so I guess what I want to leave the audience with is that the Night of the Hawk that darkness, that dark night of our soul. As I started earlier, when I introduced you, I talked about the themes of healing, love, loss, and empowerment. That's what, in my mind, your poetry book is all about. And as you yourself have shared, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And so if there are folks who want to go on this journey with you, where can they get the book, The Night of the Hawk? Where can they pick it up at?
You can pick it up on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or I have a website. It's now being distributed by Simon and Schuster, so it's on there. My website is laurenmartin.net, and so there are a lot of different options on there for picking it up.
Well, Lauren, I have enjoyed you being a guest. I do want you to come back. Like I
I
said, later
this is
we can
great.
talk about the
Yes,
dreams. I want to talk about that. And I may even have my sister to come on with us
that'd be fun.
because that would be an interesting conversation. I think folks would really enjoy it. So now for my audience, how can they stay in contact with you?
They can reach out to me either through my website or Instagram, which is Frankie, Franky is a star. So feel free to message me.
All righty then. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lauren Martin, for being my guest this episode of Talk with TAS. And to my audience, thank you again for joining us. And until next time, make sure